guys, what's up? So I have developed a new system of doing hybrid mixing with the API box console and the SSL desk, and I wanted to make this video about it just to share the journey. I've had the API now for, I think it's 2.5 years. Boy, I hate to be wrong. Maybe it's 3.5 years. No, I think it's 2.5. But, you know, I've had this journey that you can see through my other videos, where when I first got the mixer, I was very conservative, and I was using the summing side of the mixer with the fader bypass. There's a 16 channels on this side, meant to be just for summing, and each channel has it says 0 dB over it. That's really, it bypasses the faders. And you know, the idea obviously there is that if you bypass the faders, you don't have to worry about recall of fader levels, and you do all your levels in the DAW. So I started just doing that. And the way API designed the console, the left side was for recording, so recording and mixing. And you know, pretty quickly you start using outboard gear with it, and you know, it's a slippery slope, and you find after not too long that you're doing full-on analog mixing, or at least that's what happened with me. And you know, every one of these channels, these 16 channels, have analog inserts on them, which means you can put EQs, compressors on them, and really treat them like a normal channel. In this, on the left side here, you do have the benefit of the 500 series rack, so it's just convenient. Your EQ is right there in line. But you know, at the end of the day, you can have the same processing on either side. It really doesn't make that much of a difference. And then I, you know, was getting projects, particularly from Nashville, that had like 80 or 90 tracks in them, and you know, I wanted more than the 24, so I added the SSL desk. And while it's an SSL, it's not an API, and I like the API sound. What I did was I have API, mostly API equalizers, except for these two, which are like the BAE Neve 1073 style. I have them normaled to these channels, and you know, all of these EQs have transformers in them. You know, it really, that's where the majority of the sound is coming from, whether you're here or there. So, and it works. It's a very smooth integration with that. And to API's credit, on the box console, they have a special button for sum in. It's for being an external summer in, an external mixer rather in. And so I can, right now this is dedicated to drums, and I can sort of, this has its own effects returns. I can do drums on this mixer, just button it up, do everything I need to do here, and then bring them in here into the, you know, master channel, into the mix bus. So that's, you know, that's, again, this is all rehash of what's in my other videos. So for a while now, I've been doing, you know, just straight up analog mixing, you know, that way. And the output of the API goes back to the DAW, to an open stereo track, and I recapture it there. And that's been okay, but it had two major weaknesses, two big problems. And they're pretty obvious, but one of them is the same problem that most analog mixing has, which is recall. And you know, even though this is not a gigantic SSL mixer or something like that, it's a lot to recall. And I mean, there's this, and then there's also all the outboard gear over here. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff in the way. It's a lot to recall, and particularly like with these Neve style equalizers, the frequencies are stepped, but the gains are not. And that's, you know, that's a plus and a minus. I find that, you know, they're much better for being very precise at exactly tuning in how much booster cut I need. But at the same time, they never even, you can take pictures of them, but it never recalls exactly the same. The API equalizers, by contrast, even the frequencies and the gains are stepped, but stepped gains are not great. I mean, they're just not, and they're just not as precise a tool. And even though they're wonderful equalizers, so at the end of the day, it just wasn't practical. Artists and clients these days are just completely, indoctrinated and used to in-the-box mixing. And the main thing they're used to is full automation and full recall. They're used to being able to come back at you 3 weeks later, 3 months later, a year later, and be like, hey, can you drop the background vocal a dB or whatever, some tiny little tweak. And I have had to explain to them, look, I'm doing analog mixing, and we get this big benefit in the sound quality, and it's really popular right now online. I think I've seen a lot of people saying that there isn't a benefit. There is. It's definitely bigger and better with analog gear, but you lose that recall. And actually, I just said the second thing, which is the automation. The problem with that is that this board doesn't have automation on the faders, so the DAW automation is happening at the wrong stage. It's happening before you're using analog processing, equalizers, and more importantly, compressors. So it's basically any analog compression that you're using is fighting whatever moves you made in the automation in the DAW. So you drop your vocal 3 dB, and then your compressor on the vocal brings it back up 3 dB. So that's been a problem too, that it's in the wrong place. In watching videos for other people mixing, the one that really was eye-opening for me was a guy using an SSL Origin console. That's a $50,000 32-channel console, and it's a dual inline console. So it's 32 channels with 32 monitor channels. That's the small fader channels, in line. So one channel strip has both, has the monitor section and the main channel. So it's really 64 channels. And so what that guy was doing was he was taking whatever channels he was mixing, the 32 channels of mixing, then sending back to the DAW with direct outputs and to brand new open channels in I guess he was using Pro Tools. And then those new open channels are then outputting to the small faders, to the monitor section. And, the idea is that you do all of your processing on the first round, and then the monitor faders, the small channels, you're just using for summing. And the hip part about that is your automation is on the is happening in the DAW, but on those monitor outputs. So so you're getting it after your analog processing, and then also it's instant archive. You just hit record and save, save your channels, and then your recall is nothing because it's your monitor section, assuming all those small faders are zeroed out. So basically this was a very cool technique this guy was doing, and it was made possible by the fact that the Origin has 64 channels, which is nice, for him and for any Origin user. But I realized that I can pretty much do the same thing with my setup. I just have to break it up into 2 stages. And before I even got to the point of doing this as a 2-stage mix solution, for a little while, I was doing the first half of what this guy was doing, which is I would do a mix, like an analog mix, and then I would record the output of each individual channel back to the DAW. And I was using that as a method of archiving mixes, so that if I did have to recall them later, I could do basically what he was doing. But in the beginning, when I was first doing it, I was only thinking of it as an archival system. And it didn't take me very long to realize that, wait, I can just do the whole process. So what my current process is now, it's 2 stages, and what I do is, in the main project for the song, I will do when I'm done recording and editing, I will do a save as. I'll name the new project Analog Mix, and I will do a full-on analog mix. And incidentally, that includes doing the mix bus insert. And like I will typically use things like this Fern VT7 compressor. It's a stereo tube compressor. The Chandler curve bender equalizer, and that SSL bus comp, and sometimes the these Audioscape Pultec clones on the mix bus. So in this first analog stage, I'll go ahead and use those and kind of get my mix together, and then I will open up brand new channels in that analog project. I'll roll back, I'll capture all of the channels, and then I'll close that project. And I created a template in my DAW, which is I use Nuendo, which is essentially Cubase. But it doesn't matter. It'd be the same if it was Pro Tools or if it was Logic or whatever. So I'll open a fresh project, brand new, with this template. And, there's a huge advantage to that too. Because like if you've been really working, if the recording process involved a lot of overdubbing, a lot of virtual instruments and things turned on, turned off, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it's even a project that's gone on for a little while. And one thing that's happened to me is, like, it'll be a project I started in a previous version of my DAW, and they've since upgraded. And those projects tend to not be as stable as brand new ones that are made in the current version. So with this system, I create a brand new project in the template, and and then Pro Tools has this, Cubase has this, I'm sure Logic has this too. All I have to do is go to import, and I can show you. So file import, and then there's a choice for tracks from project, right? And I know Pro Tools has this too. And then you just check off all the new tracks that you captured the analog processing back to, and you set your tempo to be the same, and just import just those channels, and then you have this beautiful brand new project with the outputs already in the template. And what I do is I only have that on the right side of the console, and at that point I will engage the fader bypasses. And I'm really only using this for analog summing at that point. But one cool part is the processing that I was doing on the mix bus can stay, because it's still going through the same mix bus. And I can readjust it, of course, if I need to. But it's just nice because I can do that initial work in the initial mix, and that can be my starting point. And that ends up being the only thing I really have to archive. I just have to it's like whatever gear I'm using on the mix bus, I'll just take pictures of that. But that's not so bad. I can recall that in 30 seconds. That's not a big deal. So yeah, so that's pretty much it. And then in the new project, you know, it's one of the nice things is that it's incredibly, for me at least, it's incredibly simple. I choose to limit myself to this number of channels, and I have 2 channels dedicated to my hardware reverb, my PCM92, which, you know, again, like I can, if I'm doing in an unusual setting, I can just save it to the PCM92 and title it. But I tend to use that for like a long reverb for like a hall, and so there isn't, you know, I might tweak decay time and I might, you know, tap the tempo into it, but there's not much difference for the way I tend to use that reverb. But so I'll leave that up, and I'll actually use the aux sends on here. And, you know, I mean, I can archive those too, but it's not a tremendously big deal. I tend to use that long reverb on, you know, vocals, maybe guitars. You know, it's, you know, it's not a huge deal. Archive, you know, from an archive perspective, or recall perspective at any rate. But so what I do is, like, my tape up here is for my analog mixes, and then my tape down here is for the digital side. It's for when I'm only using this as a summing side. And so the way I break this up is I have drums low, which is just skins. It's kick, snare, toms. Drums high, which is metal. Bass, mono. Lead vocal, mono. Stereo acoustic guitar or instruments, depending on whatever we got, that's acoustic. Electric guitars, and then other. So keyboards, background vocals, whatever, you know, what have you. And then whatever plug-in effects that I'm using will come up here too. Now, that's another thing too, about like when I was doing my straight analog mixing, that was another problem, which is that plug-in effects were pretty much, you know, they were before the sounds were hitting the analog processing. And that's not ideal either. I mean, it works, but it's not ideal. And I had actually rigged, like, patching the output of, you know, 2 aux sends so that I could go after the analog processing back into the computer and use that and use plugins that way. But the problem with that is that there is inherent, you know, delay. Particularly like if I'm doing a mix, I usually have the buffer, you know, wide open. So the only kind of plugin that really could ever work for is for a reverb where what I would need to do is turn down the pre-delay in the reverb all the way and let the natural, you know, delay of the buffer, you know, of the hardware buffer be the pre-delay. And that sounds complicated, but it's clunky, you know, like getting the pre-delay setting to where you actually want it becomes, you know, a calculation, and it's just a drag, and it doesn't work. It's not ideal for tap delays, for choruses, for basically any other kind of effect that you don't want a pre-delay in. So it's not ideal. It's not a good system. And so that was always a big drawback of being able to use plug-in effects when I was doing the analog mix. So that's gone now. So, you know, in this new project, which I, you know, label the digital mix, you know, like whatever the name of the song is, and then, you know, dash digital mix, you know, I can do full automation, no problem. It's after the analog processing, and I can do whatever plug-in effects I want. And again, after the analog processing, and it's totally fine. And, you know, in a way, it's like limiting myself to this number of buses. You know, it's actually, I'm finding it's kind of an upside. It's just so, I can't describe how relaxing it is, you know, to when you have your tracks, and already just from doing the first round, the analog mix, you know, a project that was 80 tracks becomes 24 or 32 or whatever. You're already, you know, doing some bussing down, you know, but, so, you know, so when I go to do the second stage, you know, I'll have whatever channels I'm using, but so I'll have 24 channels or something, and then that's being bussed down into 14 or 12, and all of the audio at that point is beautiful. It's already been through, you know, Neve equalizers and real hardware distressors and 1176s and so on, and it's in such great shape at that point. And then, you know, if I find that something's a little too boomy or whatever, then I'll open up a plugin. Then I'll open up a FabFilter, you know, Q3 or something, you know, whatever. I'll do whatever it needs. But, you know, to have that be the starting place for a mix is so great. It's so relaxing. And the other thing about it is, I don't have to worry about gain staging at that point. I mean, unless I throw a bunch of plugins on, but even then, you know, like I generally don't need to do that. And, you know, when I'm doing the analog stage, I have to worry about, you know, all the different gain stages. And, you know, I think we all accept that as an inherent part of the job, you know, with mixing. You know, it's always a split brain situation of like thinking creatively, thinking about the music, but also having to watch all the meters and you know, and be careful of like, you know, if I bumped up this waveform a little bit, you know, make sure you're not, you know, doing something bad down the line in that channel. You know, and for me, it's like this whole rack is over my left shoulder. I'm literally looking over my shoulder throughout the entire mix, checking levels, checking VUs. To be able to sit down to mix, have the sounds be just analog beautiful, and not have to be looking over my shoulder and not have to be worrying about that, and be able to just turn off that side of my brain almost entirely and just think creatively and just worry about the music and just automation and you know, it's a beautiful thing. It's the most relaxing mix experience, you know, I can imagine. And it's just the same deal. You know, when this side is set up for summing. I'm going through the master channel. So I'm still getting the beautiful API output transformers, which is the heart and soul of this console. I'm still getting whatever outboard gear I'm using on the mix bus, and I'm still capturing it back to the project. So, you know, it really is the best of all worlds. The only compromise that I can identify is on that last stage of the mix, on that digital mix. You know, you're back to the same old issue of if you're bypassing the faders here, if you're doing them all zeroed out and you're doing your levels in the DAW, you're not optimizing your D to A levels. And you know, that's a real thing. It's not nothing, but it's a absolutely worthy trade-off for the sound quality of the analog gear, the full control of the DAW, you know, and the recall. Yeah, really, it's the best of all of those worlds, and I'm so happy about it. I mean, the first mix that I did on the new system was for you know, the country artist Matt Friedman, who I've been doing a lot of work for the last couple of years. And it was, you know, the title track on his new EP, which is actually dropping tomorrow. It's dropping Saturday, May 25th. And please, everybody go check him out on, you know, on Spotify, and he's on every major platform. He's also on TikTok. And it's Freedman, if you want to check that out. Matt is his first name, Matt Friedman, and this is his second EP. It's called Dirty Little Town, and the title track, Dirty Little Town, that was the first mix I did on this new system, and you know, came back from him no notes, and that's, you know, a big deal. Like, you know, Matt is a, you know, great artist, and he's particular. He knows what he likes. And, you know, I love working and collaborating with him and getting his feedback on stuff. But for him to come back with no notes means, you know, we really nailed it. And, yeah, I told him, I was like, hey, man, you know, we got a new system now. You can tell me any changes you want, and you can tell me any time you want, and we can do it. It's no problem. But no notes, you know. And I think my feeling is that that's all about that relaxed second stage of the mix of, you know, working with just gorgeous tracks, and you know, and you're just, your entire brain power is focused on creativity at that point. So, all right, thanks for following along. I know it's been a while since I've done a longer post like this, but you know, I wanted it to be red meat when I do it. I don't want to just post for no reason. So this is where I am. This is the latest stage of hybrid mixing for me, and you know, it's really great. I'm loving it so far. I've done a few mixes this way, and you know, I really, like I said, I think we've really got it solved. We've got it cracked. So, all right, take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.